Wondering if your device supports the Mixed Reality Toolkit? Well, I have great news. The Mixed Reality Toolkit has cross-platform support. So what that means is that you're pretty flexible with regards to which device you could actually use. Now, beyond the HoloLens and the HoloLens 2, you can deploy projects that make use of the Mixed Reality Toolkit to a variety of devices, which include the HTC Vive, Oculus Rift, Oculus Quest, Android and iOS devices, as well as the Leap Motion by Ultraleap.
Yes, for a full game, you need a game over stream. I hope we can make it in time. Although it will be tough to do this for, well, 2 attendees.
Yeah, I'm not really sure why that is. If you see the number of people who actually have,
I haven't seen that list. Yeah, but you showed me, but
well, it's just the.
I guess you just have to be very vocal in asking questions. Have to.
Oh, no worries. I'm very stupid, so.
Well, yeah, but no. But it might be that that's helpful. You do know a little bit about JavaScript and HTML. So that's basically where I start. So you're the type of person I focused the whole thing on. And we probably go pretty fast and deep near the end, but I hope that with how we get there, it will be understandable. I know it's difficult to, if you're new to something, then it's easier to read something than it is to come up with it yourself. And that's what I really hope for, that at some point you know how it all fits together. That's my end goal.
Mine too.
Oh, our webcam starts flashing. That's weird.
I was wondering, should I turn off my camera as well, so you're front center? Maybe easier.
I'm spotlighted now. I'm not sure how that is. I guess nobody's coming.
Well, except for me and Marcos.
Yes, of course.
I just checked on the YouTube. It seems that there are 8 people watching, but it says there's a slide which actually says you need to go into the Teams. So I put also a message in there. I think for some people it's still a bit difficult to get into this one, but it's actually just clicking on the link.
Yeah, I think it should work in the browser as well. So you don't need to install anything.
Yeah, you don't need a Teams account. It just works without any problems. If you don't have enough people, just do the session and see it as like a workshop with virtual people.
I will. I stream for almost nobody twice a week, so.
Oh, I was not going to say that.
No, but you recorded that.
Your session actually had the most people who actually attend, and they all got the invite, because I think Joost, you got also a separate invite which you used.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's the same link you got. So if he can actually get in, all the others should also get in.
Yep.
But the funny
with
thing
the
is,
invite, the time difference doesn't matter with the invite.
it doesn't matter. It will just work.
Shall I tweet it for people who missed it? Or don't you want me to do that, Alexander?
I'm not sure if you want to have the Teams link distributed outside on Twitter. I would recommend them to go to the Discord channel, but so you can actually create a Discord link.
You actually created a Discord link. This is a Discord link. Oh no, that's yeah,
There are
right.
2 links in the thing. So there is actually a Discord link also in the invite.
Yes.
Yeah, I think everybody goes to the YouTube. That's the problem.
We explained it very clearly.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of a workshop is that they can interact.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe they will not. They
I
will
was
not
planning
be,
on just. Oh, sorry.
now. Maybe now they would be typing in YouTube, so that would be a little bit of a problem.
Yeah, but the workshops have disabled chats for that reason, because there's no meaning to do a chat.
Or maybe people just want to watch and are scared to get into Teams. I don't know.
I was planning to keep an eye on the YouTube chat as well.
Yeah, but the YouTube chat doesn't do anything. You have 10 people watching. Is nobody reading the text? It's just, oh boy. I'm just completely confused. Oh, why are they so?
Maybe they just want to watch and are scared to do stupid
Participate.
things.
Yeah, I know. That's. I always try to do that, even if it's Teams. I just sneak in, and then I happen to be the first one, for example, and
I'm never afraid to ask stupid questions.
No, but sometimes I just don't have time to be in an entire session, for example. Then you sneak in, and or there is just some community thing where you can go in and go out if you please, and then you just go in to see what's happening, and then you're the only one except for the organizers.
I just checked, but there is actually a Discord link which goes to Discord, and then there's the link to Teams. I didn't want to do it in the description, because otherwise you get really strange people in your Teams meeting.
Yeah, there has to be a barrier.
Yeah, it's a simple barrier. I mean, just create an account and it will work. But yeah, so I would suggest just start and have 2 people in your session, and we will record it. It's already recording.
Yeah.
And I will create a recording. Sorry, the video afterwards, and I will put it online so people can still watch it. No worries about that.
Okay.
All right, let's go.
Well, let's go. Let me share my PowerPoint. But it's a workshop, I know. Let me quickly pick it. It's right over here. Oh. Apparently, you cannot share PowerPoints in Teams when the PowerPoint file is opened. Ah.
And there they come.
I could actually admit people. Interesting.
See, people are coming in. Loading your presentation. I think we do it like this. Welcome, welcome. We waited a few more minutes for people to come in, and we're just about to start. If I'm correct, you can see the PowerPoint now, right? Okay, cool. This is the first time I'm doing it with a PowerPoint, so I'm glad it works. Well, welcome everybody. We're going to do a little bit of a thing I've never done before. We're going to build a game together. You should be able to follow along. If you haven't already, there is a link in the chat where you can download or clone a GitHub repository. I will show the link on a slide as well. There are a few prerequisites before we can before to follow along. But if you're a web developer, you'll probably have those already. So this is the plan. We're just going to first have a little bit of a look on how you can approach a game like this, how you can build your project, how you can test your project. Then we have a look at how you can get assets for your games for free, preferably, but also for cheap. I want to have a look at A-Frame. That's what we're going to build our game with, and I just want to give a little bit of a heads up on how to use A-Frame. And then we dive in and build our game with the complete game loop. We have a title screen, we have a game over screen, we have spaceships flying around, and we can use the VR controllers to shoot them. And it should also work on the desktop. And my goal is to have, well, to get more people familiar on how you would build a simple game like this, how everything fits together, all the concepts. And maybe in the end, it will be too complex or goes a little bit too fast. Everything is on GitHub. My whole script will be on GitHub eventually. And you should be able to redo it. And also feel free to interrupt. If we are an hour and a half in and we're still not at the end, I can switch to the final project and speed things up. But I really want to have people, well, just learn something. So if I go too fast, if you have questions, just. Also, one thing to notice: there are a few places where I took some shortcuts for simplicity and for time. There are obviously way better ways of doing things, but they are more complex to look at. Let me quickly introduce myself. If you missed the previous session, I work as a senior developer at WebXR, where we save life using holograms. We did a presentation on our CPR Plus application together with Joost. I work as a HoloLens developer using Unity and C#. Most of the time, do a little bit of web development as well, because that has been my background for the past too many years. Outside of work, I am live coding twice a week on Twitch, where I stream development of my own little WebXR games, VR games. Sometimes I do some HoloLens things as well, using web technologies, but mostly it's VR. I have a YouTube channel, and I'm also an administrator on the or a moderator on the WebXR Discord. I created a Linktree thing. So that's everything you want to know about me is in that Linktree. But if you Google source code, you find me as well. So let's get started. As I said, there are a few prerequisites. I'm using VS Code. Technically, you could use every editor you could use for web development. It's just we're doing HTML, JavaScript. To get the code, you have to clone my repository. If you use the B start in there, you already clone the right branch. To get the build pipeline going, we're using you have to use npm. If you don't have it, you can just install Node. And I don't know if you have to check the install everything checkbox. I don't think it's needed, but I'm using my Quest for testing. If you have a device, I will show you how it's using. If you have a Quest, you need to make sure development mode is on. Otherwise, you cannot debug it remotely, and you cannot set up the local connection. Now, to create you test locally, you can set up port forwarding in your browser. So if you have Edge or Chrome, you can go to the inspect page, and there is an option where you can enable port forwarding, and you can just say, well, in this example I had, the last one was port 8080 is forwarded to localhost. And if then some request comes in from your Quest or any other device, then it's forwarded to that port. I've changed the port to 1337 in my example, because I have some issues with all kinds of stuff running also on port 8080, so that will break quite often in my system. But 8080 is one of the most used ports. One thing that is really helpful, and I will be using in this workshop as well, is the WebXR emulator. This is a browser extension that gives you the ability to debug a fake VR device right locally on your desktop in the browser. You can go into VR, you can rotate the headset, move the controls, do the select and the trigger buttons. I believe there is an update on the way where you can use all the buttons. But that's not there yet. I use this all the time. Right before the workshop, I added this slide. I noticed I have some code completion in my VS Code. It's coming from this extension. It's not perfect. It has the default A-frame stuff in there. So if you add your own components, they won't show up, but it's helpful. And I want to mention it because it might be different on your machine if you don't have this component installed. And this is A-frame specific, so if you're using something else, the first of the previous two slides were for every framework, every development. I'm using other frameworks as well, and those two things is just always usable. This one is A-frame specific. Also, the inspector is also A-frame specific. If you have an A-frame application, if somewhere there is an A-frame application, you can just press Ctrl-Alt-I and the inspector would pop up. This is really helpful for fine-tuning things, setting up a light. You can visually see what's happening, but you can also copy things back to your code base. So if you move a light, you set it up correctly, you can just say, okay, I want to copy this and paste it back in your code. You can set up a server that runs locally where you can automatically sync things, but I'm not using that. But it's really helpful just to fine-tune everything, place things into the real space. Other questions so far? No. Feel free to interrupt if there's a question. Then the assets. I like to use free assets, and there are quite a few around. But there are also some paid tools that are, well, not that expensive. I don't like paying $200-300 for an asset that I would use in a simple game for my hobby projects. This one, Quaternius, is one that I use quite often. They're free, a lot of free models. I'm using them in this game as well. The spaceships come from Quaternius. I used a couple of different sources in this game just to show them. Most of the time I use something from one pack because it all looks the same then. Or I would download it and modify it slightly, change some materials so it all looks the same. But that's kind of the next thing. And if you want to support it, they have a Patreon as well. Kenny is one of the best known ones for free assets. They have 2D assets, 3D assets. You can buy packs with thousands of assets. I'm using a couple of things from Kenny's. I think the guns came from Kenny's, and also I used a kit with all kinds of different elements that I used in another tool to build the base. One of the tools I've used in this game is TextCraft. It's a very simple and easy way to create a logo. You just press a few buttons and you have a logo for free. There's also a paid version where you have a higher resolution images, and you can also save your creations on their server. Then paid assets. I have bought some assets on the Unity Asset Store. Now you might be thinking, but you're not using Unity, you're just creating a web game. That is correct. But a lot of asset packs on Unity have a license where you can use them anywhere, except for a few. Mostly the ones from Unity themselves are not free to use everywhere, but most of the assets you can just download and use in every other project. You just need Unity to download them, and then you can use the FBX files, for example, to use them. Another great source of resources is itch.io. They have a lot of little tools there and assets as well. The tools there are often free or cost you like $2 or something, so it's not that much. And the real paid assets are coming from CG Trader, ArtStation. Those are the big ones. But they sometimes have nice discounts. And also I use Humble Bundle quite a bit. There you have, sometimes there are great bundles, then you pay like $25 and you have 60 packs of stuff with like music or sound effects, or a lot of what I use in my bigger games comes from previous Humble Bundles. One thing I also noticed is if there is something going on CG Trader or ArtStation, or if you find something interesting on CG Trader or ArtStation, also check the Unity store. There might be discounts there for the same assets, or prices might just be lower. I've seen that happen as well. Then I've used two tools to create some things for this game. The base is something you see on this image that I created. It's called kit bashing. You just download a kit. There are a couple of kits in there. You throw things together. That's a pay tool. It's $20 for the simple version, and that's missing some of the packs you can use. And there's a $40 version where you have everything they have. It's perpetual license, so you just pay once and you are good to go forever. And I've also used CanShape, which is a pretty simple tool where you can draw a pixel art, give it a depth, and then you have a 3D model. Pretty simple to use, only $4. I use that quite a lot as well. Right, then the game itself. I call it Space Shooter, but that's basically what it is. I'm going to go over this again as we go into the game itself. But this is the basic structure of every game I wrote for the last 3-4 years. I always have a source folder. All my JavaScript files, everything I need for the game itself is in the source folder. The components I write are in the components folder. It's a bit broader. If there's a system like in the A-frame situation, then I'm adding it to the components as well. There could be some other folders. In this case, I only have components. I have a static folder. The static folder is just copied as a whole to a deployment folder by the build pipeline. And there's a main.js. And in main.js, there's basically a couple of imports from all the other files, which are combined into one. And there's a package.json and a web config file. If you clone to the project, you will see the same structure. Then there's a build pipeline. Now, this might be something, if you're not really familiar with web development, that might be weird. A build pipeline, you just have an HTML file you can serve. That is correct. But you can also combine files into one. That's what's happening in this case. There could be shaders in there that need to be combined, and you want to deploy them to a deployment folder. I'm using Webpack to automate everything. It has a simple config file, but it's completely extensible. You can do whatever you want, from even adding custom stuff to that build pipeline. And there's also a simple server that comes with it that you can just run, and it auto refreshes on changes, refreshes your browser, so you don't have to hit refresh every time. The only downside of Webpack is that it adds a tiny little bit of extra overhead code. And in cases like, for example, JS13K, where you have to build a game in 13 kilobytes, every byte counts. So in that case, it's not really useful. But I think in the games like this, it's so helpful, and I use it a lot. They're also within the web or the package.json file, there are 3 commands I use. One for building the game, just to run the script and place it in a deployment folder. Also a production build. That's something we don't use in this case. But if you would push something to GitHub in your own game and you want to automatically run a GitHub action that's going to deploy it to, say, an Azure static website, then you need to build a production build. Also start, that's what we were using, that just spins up the web server and runs everything. Are there questions so far?
Nope.
Oh,
Just
cool.
curious how to go on.
So I'm going to show a little bit of about A-Frame, which is the framework I've used a lot in the past. Currently, I'm most often using a different engine, Wonderland. There are some sessions on Wonderland as well in the conference, but I think if you have if you don't have a real background in web development, the learning curve of A-Frame is a little smoother than in Wonderland. But I've seen that Wonderland is pretty powerful. It renders 500,000 polygons in the browser without and on the Quest without a problem. I'm building a big zombie shooter game that's running without a problem in using Wonderland, which is pretty cool. Anyway, we're talking about A-Frame today. So in A-Frame, you just write HTML. If you can read HTML, and I think most people, even non-developers, have seen HTML at some point. There are a couple of custom tags. Everything in A-Frame is constructed in a scene attribute or entity. Element, an element it is, a scene element. And there is in this case, an a entity element in between. A element is the base element of pretty much all elements that are used for A-Frame. I just noticed there's a typo in here. I changed it to from a entity to a box. It should say a entity twice. A box is another element you can use. And that's basically what's called the entity. Then you have a component. Geometry in this case and material are components. Those can be components that came from A-Frame or components you write yourself. And then you can provide parameters and values, and those you can configure in your components as well. So you just create basic HTML. If we are used to Unity, for example, the entities here are basically the game objects in Unity, and what's a component here is basically a mono behavior, and then the parameters are the attributes of your mono behavior, just to give it a bit of a comparison to Unity. And just like in Unity, you can nest things, you can do things with them, you can add them to your scene, remove them from your scene. You said a box there. There are a couple of primitives. Like a sphere, a cylinder. I'm using the sky. I'm not always using primitives for things, but they all have a position, a rotation, and a scale. You can add a color to do things. The very first demo, I'm going to show that again. As I said, you can nest them, and one great thing is the inspector. You can just see this structure again within the inspector, and I will show that as well. Loading of assets is something that is very important in the game. Textures, models. Textures are just loaded by using an image element, a standard image element inside an A asset group. You can also add asset items. In this case, it's a gun model that's with something with an ID gun model to reference it, and it has a source to the gun. And there's something that I'm going to use in the game as well. That's called a mixin, and that is basically creating a partial object to just set up a few things. In this case, I want to have a gun always scaled at 20%, and I always said I already set the model there. So now, if you can see in the bottom line, we have something with the class gun that's just a standard CSS class, and you mix that mixin in there. This is something to just have something structured. You can do that from code as well. So if you want to add like an enemy specification to something, you just add an enemy mix-in, and then you have the enemy. Works really fast. And you can just reference things from, for example, in the material, you reference by ID, just the source of the material.
Is this like a Unity prefab? The mixin?
It is, yeah, not as flexible as a prefab, but I'm using it as a prefab.
Thank you.
Then the last thing I want to show is the component. You will see these a lot. You need to register them with A-frame. You give them a name. They have a schema. These are the properties of the component. In this case, it has a color that is default green. If you don't specify it, it will be green. Otherwise, it will be what is specified. The colors that are used are just HTML colors, which is pretty helpful. And then there are a couple of lifecycle functions. For example, init, and in this case, I'm using a standard JavaScript timeout that after 5 seconds changes the color from whatever it is to the color I specified. And if you look at this little example, it creates a sphere that it was blue, and after that 5 seconds, it changes it to pink. So this is basically the syntax of how you would create a component and then use it in the game you're building or app. So that's my slides. I hope everything is still clear. If something is not clear, feel free to interrupt, write something in chat, and I will explain. So let me see. Stop presenting.
Getting busy in here.
Are people coming in?
Yeah, I'm admitting them for you.
Oh, cool. Welcome, everybody. Let's see. I need to have this desktop. So there's some street racing going on. That's not the game. This is the exact same state as everybody could be cloning if they want to follow along the code from GitHub. You start with this exact same thing. It has an index file. I set it up already with loading the A-frame script. I'm actually using A-frame, the previous version of A-frame. I ran into some issues all of a sudden. I haven't figured out how to fix them, so I've added the previous version that worked. A-frame is using 3JS under the hood, and there has that something went wrong there with an update of 3JS. I think that's why you see A-frame 1.1 here. The shooter script is what is being generated by the build pipeline. Build pipeline is defined here. It's basically configuration that says I want this entry point converted to shooter in the deploy folder. I want to copy the static folder, and for the dev server, I want to run the deploy folder, and I want to watch everything on port 1337. That's basically everything that's in there. I don't want to spend too much time there. Now let's add some A-frame stuff to this thing. If I do shooter, well, I think I do shooter 1. We get a little scene. Pretty much the same as I showed before. We have a scene, and there are a couple of those entities in there.
Excuse me, can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
There seems to be a lot more in my index.html than yours.
Do you have the right branch?
Oh God.
So in the normal branch, there is the final version of the game. I think you muted your mic.
Yeah, I missed the start branch. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, this is basically where I hope that bit will end. If we do npm start, that's the command to start a little web server. We wait a second, and now it's being served. And we can open it. Oh, in a browser window. And this is the scene. We're standing on a green plane with the objects around us. Now let's check it out. Oh, I think, yes, I have it set up here already. So this is the inspect window with that port forwarding. I do have that port set up here that I'm running. And you can see if there's a connection to your Quest, you can see that you just can, you can see everything that's in the Quest browser. And it's actually already running. So let's see if it's there. So you should be able to see this right now. Now the default background is black here, but I can walk around. Now there's nothing on the controllers there. I cannot move, but I can look. There's the yellow one. There's the blue cube. So I know everything is working there. Let me grab my notes.
Can you show that last command you ran? It says, by me, Webpack is not recognized as an internal or external command.
Did you run npm install? So I might have missed that, but that's when you clone the repository, you have to run npm install to install the packages. Otherwise, Webpack is not in there. Now, this doesn't look anything like a space game yet. So let's add some space type background. We're just going to drop and add things prepared here. So we go and drop this in the static folder. This is a 360 image of debris floating in space. Now we want to load this asset in the scene. As I showed before, we can use assets. This is not what I want. So we do shooter, and we do the Galaxy asset. This loads that space JPEG on ID 1. And I've done it before, and I have Copilot running, and that's giving suggestions about what it learned, coming from the internet and coming from my own code base, and it's already giving me quite some nice suggestions. I've seen Copilot completely write my code, and it's some AI extension that's doing a little bit more than just IntelliSense. It's kind of cool that it gives, I think, the right asset. So now we have a space texture. I just saved the file. I go here. It's automatically refreshing, and now we have well, the same scene, but now it is in space. Now this doesn't look like a base where you could be standing on shooting. So let's just remove all of this and see if we can add the base to the game. I'm going to use the next code snippet. Oh, snippet. It's not snippet, it's shooter. I named them shooter base asset 4. In this case, I'm using the asset item, and I also need to make sure I drag the model to the right place. This loads the base model on ID 1, and we have that have to add that to the scene as well. So we do shooter base ID. So now let me format it. So now we have a GLTF model. GLB is a binary version of GLTF with the ID base. and just why not add some shadow casting to it. I saved it. It should automatically refresh, and there we have the base I showed from that earlier screenshot. That's right here. Now, at this point, I haven't defined a camera. I haven't defined any lighting, but there is shadow. So there is lighting in this scene. You could see there is lighting going on. And we can look around. So there is a camera. And actually, I can drag the mouse to look around. But if I do the WASD keys, I can even fly around through my scene. And that's just coming from the default camera. Now, this is the model. If you're standing in the middle, you don't see anything outside it, but it's just like a old Western style building. But from this standpoint, it looks like you are on an extension of some space station or something. Now, if I hit Control-Alt-I, I can load the inspector. And at this point, when I drag, I'm not really looking at the camera, but I can look at the model that is here. I can select things, and if you look in this side here, you can see there is a camera. I can select it. I can see all the properties, and here are the WASD controls, the look controls. This is what we're actually using, and there are two lights in there. But now, yeah, this light. This is a. There are different types of lights, and I cannot read because Teams is in the way. This is an ambient light, and the other one is probably a directional light. You can move this around, and you can see the light change. And now, say you want to have a more dramatic effect. You can position this. You can change the intensity. So say you want this more intense. You can change the colors. You can change everything. If you are happy with this, you can hit that button on the top here, and that copies the HTML of that element at that point. You can go back to your scene and you can just paste it in. And now it has a light that casts a shadow. Now this is the default light, so it has a special tag in here, so we could remove those. And this is a way of completely setting up a scene. I prepared some lights in the next snippet. I'm using 3 lights actually. One is that same ambient light. I have one light that is coming from a point that is casting shadows, that is giving some kind of effect. And I have one light that is just for making every light up. If you have one light, things might turn out a little bit too dark. Now I save, it refreshes, and now you can see it's a bit lighter. You see some dramatic shadows in the doorway, and it has, I think it has more like a space station look now. Now to get these lights in place, I just drag them, and then you end up at some fractional number. So I just rounded them down to have nice numbers. Now we need to have something to shoot with if we want a space shooter. So we need to get the controls. And getting the controls in A-frame is pretty straightforward. Let me just copy this. I didn't really plan on typing it out, but since we started a bit late, I'm just copying it. This creates 2 entities. They're pretty much the same, except this one is for the left hand, this one is for the right hand, and one of them has a red cube inside it, and the other one has a blue cube inside it. Now, when you move the controls, you basically move the outer thing, outer entity, but everything that's in there will automatically follow because it's nested. And this way you can scale something, move things into position without affecting the thing that's around it. I'm using the Oculus Touch controls here. A bit later I'll show how you can change this so it will use pretty much all devices. If it's safe, it should automatically reload. Now we don't see anything except those cubes. They are lying on the floor. We'll fix that in a second. Now, if we hit F12, we get into the debug tools of the browser. And I have the extension installed, set to Quest. Now when I hit VR, my browser thinks that VR is there, that there is a VR device connected, so I can switch into VR. And now it also detects, wait, there are two controllers connected. So now I can just move these around. And even without, if you don't have a VR device, but you still want to develop for it, you can just try things. And if you click something twice, you can rotate. This is really helpful with debugging. If you want to point to something specific, to test something, you can do that right here. And let me also show that it works in VR. To prove it, it should automatically reload. Yes, and there we have a red cube in the left hand and a blue cube in the right hand. Now, it doesn't shoot, it doesn't look like a gun. So let's change the cube to a gun. To do that, we need to have the Blaster G model. Get it here. And we need to load it as an asset. So I'm using shooter gun asset. This loads the same model. You can see this is just the same thing as we did before. It's loading the model file with ID Blaster. And now we can just go in and replace entity. To get it correctly, I had to rotate it and scale it down a bit. Apparently, it's using a different scale to load the models, and I'm just using that one there. And I'm just using it twice. Oh, that's not the right one. Gun entity. And that way we have two entities in there. And if we go to the browser, it should be automatically reloaded. Still in VR. There is something lying on the ground here that is changed. So that is the VR or the guns. And now we're in VR, so we can reset the pose. Well, yeah, we have one. So now we can just use the gun to move those. And if I quickly show them in VR, we have two guns now, and we can. Well, they're not doing anything because we haven't added trigger yet, but it starts to feel like a space shooter now. We are standing in a space platform in space with guns. We are already making progress. But I said we would build a game that runs on desktop as well. Now, if I exit immersive, the guns are floating somewhere there, and I cannot do anything with them. This doesn't look like something I could shoot with on a desktop. I just added the lights. We don't have a camera here. We're still using the default camera. And to do something with the camera, in this case, I want to attach the guns to the camera. So if we rotate on a desktop, the guns should rotate with the camera. So we should add guns as child objects to the camera. If I take the next snippet, shooter desktop gun camera, I need to add the camera. I added the class player to it. It's something I do, so now I can find it if I need it. It has a camera object on there. I removed the WASD controls because I don't want you to look to walk around, but I want you to look around. And I enabled the pointer lock, and what that does is if I click this, and now it didn't refresh. If I click this, why isn't it working? I didn't save it. That's why I didn't refresh. When I click it, my mouse is captured by the canvas, and if I move the mouse, it is just following where I look. And now I can just look with the mouse and well, hopefully in the end shoot with the spacebar. Now I said we need to add the guns to the camera, so let's do that. Let's go to shooter desktop guns. This adds a little bit more. It's pretty similar to what we have with the previous guns. Again, there are 2 entities with a blaster in between. I broke the line off a bit earlier, so it would fit. 2 guns, but these have a position. One is slightly off to the right, and the other one is slightly off to the left. I nested them both again in one entity and moved it. And this is something I did in the inspector. Just moved it around, played with it in the inspector, tried it, moved it until it was okay. Now let's save this file, and now we should have 2 guns sticking to the camera. We can go here. Now if we remove this, we have a little bit more room. Let's make sure it's correct. There we go. So now we cannot move around, and we have 2 guns attached to the camera. It almost feels like we're sitting in some kind of sort of turret or something, and we can start shooting some enemies. But there are no enemies yet. Are there questions, by the way, till this point? We didn't write any scripts yet, and I don't have any thing on Teams. I don't know if there's anything in chat. Can I move this here? Yes.
There isn't anything in chat. I think we're just trying to follow you along.
Yes. If I go too fast, feel free to slow me down. Just interrupt, unmute, just scream stop, and I will halt, or just write something in chat. I will try to keep an eye on it. Because we're going to step it up right level. In my code, I wrote, congratulations, you've reached level 2. At this point, we have created the scene just by adding HTML elements. We didn't do any coding yet. All basic A-frame stuff, and it already starts to look like a game. But right now, we're going to go and see if we can add an enemy. I really simplified it. The enemy is going to fly on a path in circles. And in a real game, you might want to create a whole bunch of different paths, and at a certain point in time, enemies spawn in certain waves. But I think you can come up with a way of adding that based on this code. So let's go and start by adding the Spitfire model. Now it's not a real Spitfire, it's not a classic Spitfire, but for some reason the modeler decided to call this model a Spitfire. So we need to have that. We need to load the asset. Again, similar as we did before. Load the enemy asset. Now, in this case, I've showed it in the slides. In this case, I'm going to use a mix-in. So if I do shooter enemy mix-in, in this case, I give it an ID of enemy. It loads the model, and there is this one, which is the enemy component. I want to, every time I create an enemy, I just want to be able to drop in this mix-in, so I don't have to set up anything else. And this is just using the enemy script, the enemy component. So let's create that. I'm just going to my components, new file, enemy.component.js. You don't have to name them this way. I always name my components component. We'll be adding 2 systems as well. So in that case, it just on the components folder, but they're also systems. And I like to be able to just quickly see what's a component and what's a system. Just using another script. Now it drops a lot of code already. But it's creating an enemy component with an empty schema. There is no setup here. You can make things variable, like the loop time, for example. Loop time is the time it will take to circle one loop. I've created this path. It's nothing more than an array of points in space around you. And there is a function in 3JS, the Catmull-Rom curve, that's taking a path and that create a curved version that's going through all of these points. And I give it a true as well, because that would close the loop. And this way we have a complete loop. Now there's a reason I chose it to do it this way, and that's coming up next. There is a tick function. The tick function runs every cycle. And the time delta is the most valuable property it has. This is the time it took between this tick and the previous tick. So if for some reason something took a little bit longer, this value will be a little bit bigger. But by using the time delta value, you get a consistent increase of the time. I've set this to 12,000, which is 12,000 seconds, milliseconds, which is 12 seconds. So if that timer of the loop is over 12 seconds, we just reset it to 0. So this will do 12 seconds for a complete loop. And the reason I chose that curve function is that it has a get point at, and this will just give us one point in 3D space at a certain amount. And this is a value between 0 and 1. So we're just divided by the loop time, and now we have a point on that loop between 0 and 1, and it just goes consistently from one to the next based on loop time. I added another thing. If you don't add the look at, the enemy will just stay the same and just move in one direction, and it has to fly forward. So it looks at a slightly point further in the line, which I made it 001. That's how far it looks ahead. But there is a tiny chance that for some weird reason, after a full loop, this will be more than 1. If this is more than 1, this function will crash or give an error, and that's not what we want. So if we go beyond 1, and this is if we 1,000 before the end, if that would happen, then we'll just pick 1. Now there is an even smaller chance that we would get 1, and at that point you would see the spaceship flicker or something, but it's way in the distance, and I think the chances of taking a 12,000 step loop and getting exactly to 1 is, well, I think there's a bigger chance that there's life on Mars. So let's add this to the next file. We need to import this to add it to our game. So we import and we say components, point slash, mean it's a local file, components slash enemy component. We save, and now this refreshes. We go in here, and nothing happens. Why? Well, we never added the actual enemy to the scene. So the next step will be adding the enemy to the scene. So we need to create a spawner system that just runs every now and then and spawns an enemy and adds it to the scene. So I'm going to add another component, which is the enemy. You know what? I don't think I need to type it out. I'm just going to copy it. This is an even simpler function. Or actually, this is a system. A system is something that is added to the root of the component, and it's the root entity, the scene entity, and it's just a bit simpler to access. It looks the same as a component, but just by there is some more to it. But in this case, I just use it to differentiate. It's not a component you just throw on an object to use throughout your game. There is only one enemy spawner, and that is over there. I need to make one change to this to make it work for now. So when we initialize, I'm just going to start the spawning, and this just goes every 666 milliseconds. It spawns an enemy. The reason why I choose a weird number is that it's exactly 12 seconds to go around. If I would say, well, I want to spawn an enemy every 6 seconds, while the second one is back at start, so they will just be spawning at the exact point where they meet. So just by using this number, this is something you could change eventually. For example, when you are going to make the game progressively harder, you can spawn them faster, or maybe use some other way of creating the enemies. How you would add something dynamic to the game is just by creating another entity, like you would create any other DOM element in your HTML, just an entity, and adding the mixin attribute. This is all standard HTML for creating something. To be able to reference and find them in the scene, I add the enemy class, and then I add them to a root element. And that root element needs to be added to the scene as well, which is just a entity with an ID of enemies. It's just an empty entity as a place to store them in. It's just for finding them. If you need to have all the enemies for some reason, you can just grab this thing and look what's inside. I always group things like this. So if you need it, you can find them back. And I think that's it for the spawning. So if we go here, now we should wait 6 seconds. And something should be happening. Oh no, I made the same mistake. This is something I always do. I need to figure out how to improve that. I need to add it to the main. If you don't import the script, and the reason I'm importing it here is just to tell the system that there is a script. I want to have the components and the enemy spawner. Also, I forgot to add it to the scene. So we have this one here to the scene. I just add the enemy spawner to the scene object. That's the easiest way of placing the systems. Now it should start, and after 6 seconds, we should see our first plane go. Now it's following the path, just flying right above, and then it's turning around and making a full loop. We cannot shoot them yet. But it's starting to look like a game. We are on a space station with guns, and there are spaceships flying around. So we're slowly getting there.
If that's a Spitfire, I'm a bean.
Yeah, I don't know why it's called a Spitfire. It's absolutely... You could build the same thing with the Spitfire, I guess, but it would be a different game. At least they could have textured it like a Spitfire. Are there any questions so far? Now we've reached level 3. We have to add, so basically the game is complete now. We have to add a lot of scripts to spawn missiles that are going to fly out of the guns. We need to do the collision detection when the missile hits a gun. I want the spaceships to drop bombs or something. If there are no questions, we continue. We're going to add the shoot component. I want the controls to be able to shoot. Now, this is a very interesting component. It's a component I use in all of this type of games with slight modifications. And this is basically taking care of handling the controls. By default, it's set to the left hand, but you can use this for the left and the right hand. It adds an event listener for the button down and the button up. in A-frame, the button down and button up trigger on the components or on the controllers. So if you press a button on the controller, you would hit this event. To identify what it is, I added these. I'm not sure if these are similar to other controllers because I only have a Quest. But just for debugging right now, it's easier to read trigger than it is to read 0. We handle the event, so I map the button name by the ID I get from the event. I check if we press the button, and then I'm going to take some vector wizardry and create a rotation vector, because I want to know if we press the button on a gun, I want to know how it's rotated. If you're shooting in that direction or if you're shooting in that direction, it makes a lot of sense in this game. So that's why I just quickly calculate a vector for the direction. And then I just emit a new event. And this is because I want to use a keyboard, for example, that is also using buttons. And I've done things where you could even use your phone, because this would run on a phone as well. And if you touch the screen, I also need to trigger a button down. So there are all kinds of different ways, and they all trigger a button down on the scene element with the same parameters. And this is basically converting any random event that's coming in, emitting a button down, so we can handle a button down on the scene. I need to keep track of what actually caused the trigger down. So this, the element that is using it, this L is something in A-frame that's always referencing the element the component is placed on. Like in Unity, you could have this game object, I think, that's just the game object that the entity or the script is on. This is a similar thing. I just passed that on. In here, I have an update method that's adding some attributes. We already have the Vive touch controllers or the Oculus touch controllers, but this should work with the Vive controllers and the Windows motion controllers as well. There are a few more options, but they are slightly different. And I separated the keyboard controls out of it. You could do that in this case as well, or in a component like this as well. But since we have separated the guns for the, I just realized I missed a script. Yes. Well, we do that after this. We had the guns stick to the camera, and we had them in our hands, so we have them both. One of them is going to have this component, and the other one is a component we're going to create in a second, which is specific to the keyboard, because we don't have to, and that's why I actually commented out this line. So that's how the shoot work. Now quickly to that component I forgot to add, which is the visible in VR, which is this one. This is one of those scripts you can just use in, well, pretty much any application you build. There are always things you want to be visible in VR, or things that you won't like to be visible in VR. It's a very simple script, visible in VR. If you pass false, it's actually not visible in VR. So it starts with the inverse of the value you set. So if you set visible in VR, it starts not visible on the desktop. Then when you enter VR, it becomes visible, and when you exit VR, it hides it again. And based on if you pass true or false, it will be visible or not visible in VR. A pretty simple script, but very, very useful. And I need to add it to main as well. So let's do both. Oh, import. We'd have the shoot component. Putting in time. Oh, we need to speed up a little bit. And the VR component. we need to add that visible in VR here as well. So I want to hide these in VR. So what I can do, or when I'm not in VR, I'm just adding an empty entity. This, and I say visible in VR is visible. Because these should be visible in VR. And in the case of the other one, oh, it was already in here. That's why I did the order wrong. I skipped this one, this step. And now it should not be visible in VR. So if we go in here, we don't see those two floating guns anymore. And if we just check here, I'm not sure if you have to open it, but if you go into VR, I'm not sure why we see both now. Visible in VR, visible false. This is funny. This is one of those things that worked when you did it up front. Visible in VR false. I know what I did wrong. I didn't add it to the guns. I was looking at the wrong file. So there are two index files in here, and I was the end result. I'm sorry. Let me just. Oh crap! Did I edit this file? Yeah. So we have those controls. It's visible in VR. This is not even. It's not even the controls. Let me fix it. This is the one. This is the guns we need to have. The guns. And the camera is finished as well. So we have the visible in VR false here, and we have the visible in VR on the guns. Default is true. So now we should have no guns. They're not on the ground. They're not anywhere. If we go into VR, we have the guns on the controllers, but not on the headset. Right. We need to add bullets and missiles. Let me quickly check if I can speed it up. Are people still following along? Is it followable?
Yeah, more or less, but I've given up following coding with you.
So I think it might be more valuable to, since I have 20 minutes left. I practiced it and I could do it in way faster than I did now, but since we started a little bit late,
go on a little bit longer.
Let's just go on. Where was I? I just added the shoot component. Yeah, I just added the shoot component. What I need to do now, and I just probably did it already. Yes, I needed to change it, but since I copied it to fix that screw up, there's a shoot component on the right hand and the left hand. Now, when I go here, let me show you some other trick. We go in here and we say shoot component. We just see the component. And I can add a breakpoint, for example, right here. This makes debugging quite easy. We go into here. We are in VR. I can move the controllers around, and I can just squeeze the button. And as soon as I squeeze it, it triggered that event. And we can just go in and see what's in here. This is the entity. That's the object. We have a default rotation. Now it's pointing exactly straight forward. So we get really nice values here. Position is a bit weird because I just drag it around. But you can see you can just debug it as well in VR. Now, if you really want to debug from VR, you can also inspect remotely, and you just get the dev tools. And now this is connected to my Quest. If you want to, if you have some weird issue that's only happening on the device. Next, we need to have a gun controller, and I'm just going to copy it. The gun component is going into the components folder. I need to make sure that I don't forget to add it to the file here. Now, there's probably a way of automatically adding all the components here, but sometimes you don't even want to have all of them in. And we need to add that to the guns. Now I copied it, so it's here, here, and here, and here. So all the 4 guns that are in the game have the gun component. And let me show you what that does. The gun component is handling the firing of the gun to spawn a bullet and shoot it in the air. So we're just listening to the fire event that we're going to spawn in going to emit in a second, and that is going to spawn a missile. And I keep track of the missile group because I want to place them in there. And at that point, spawn, we just create another element, which is a missile, which we're going to add in a second as well. And it's just going to have a direction, a position, and a target. Then it adds the bullet to that missile, because this script is not only the bullet, but also the bomb that is coming to us. Will also use the same missile script, and that's just containing the bullet, and it appends it, and then that's just doing its thing. Now, as I said, we need to have that fire event. So what we need is a game system. So let's add that. Game system JS. Let's do shooter 14 is the game system. Game systems always start like this with barely any code, then they start growing and growing and growing. This is always, in my games, the heart of the game, the thing that puts everything together, keeps track of the state of the game. If you are at the start screen or if you are playing, keeps track of the score, all those kind of things. In this case, I have a collision function we're going to call from the bullets. If a bullet collides with something, this is taking care of it. If you want to do something with that, for example, adding a score, you can do that right here. And this is the fire event. This is the button down event I talked about earlier. It's going to emit a fire event on the source. So we fire a gun with the direction and position to pass that on so we can spawn a bullet. Now, before we can run it, we need to do this self-destruct. Self-destruct is also one of those scripts I just copy around everywhere. If you want to remove something, an element, you can just call remove, but sometimes you want to do more or remove something in the future. That's always something you will run into, and that's why I use this thing. You slap a self-destruct on an object, and then after a certain amount of time, by default 5 seconds, I do it in 1 millisecond. and then it removes it from the scene. And it automatically, it uses the remove from the lifecycle and clears out the timeout, so it doesn't keep trying to remove itself because there is a timer function lingering somewhere. We also need to add the game system. Oh, I already did that. This is final. Yeah, this is final. I didn't do it. There, game, we add that to our scene. And the last thing, we add the game component. Oh. And we add the self-destruct component. Save. Oh, we have an error. Game component. Oh, it's not component, it's system. There we go. Do we have anything now? No, because we need to shoot something. So the last thing we need to add here is that missile or the bullet. I'm going to go into my models. I have a bullet right here. I drop it in my models. Now, need to go into the right one. We need to add the bullet asset. We need to add the shooter bullet mix-in. Again, this is just creating, loading the asset, setting it to a model. In this case, I want to have a rotation and scale it down quite a bit so it fixes. Now, every time I need to bullet, I just use this mix-in, and that's how we create the bullet. We need to copy the missile script. 10 minutes left. Okay. We're going to step it up after this. This is the missile script. It's a pretty fun script that just animates something. And by default, it's using roughly the speed of a tomahawk if you want to shoot missiles. Actually, I slowed it down quite a bit so you can see the missile flying. It has some properties like the position, the target it's using. It starts by creating it, looking in a certain direction. If it doesn't move or moves really slow, you should right away see it in the right direction. And then every tick, it just updates in a certain direction. It has a lifetime because I don't want anything to be flying on forever and just spam the whole scene with an infinite amount of random objects. So I added a lifetime to it. By default, it's 5 seconds. So if this thing reaches 5 seconds, it's automatically removed. It's something you can play with if you start to get lag, for example. You could lower that value a bit to remove them earlier. As long as it's further away than the planes go, you're fine. Then we need to check the collision. And in this case, I'm doing it in the easiest, but probably the worst way. I'm just doing a query selector all, but I wanted to show that this is possible to do. I just do a query selector all to get all the elements in my scene, in my DOM. The target is an enemy class I give, and then I run through all of the targets. Now there are like, well, at some point, say 25. Now you have a lot of planes flying around, 25 planes flying around. So this runs 25 times every tick. Every update of the game, this runs 25 times. So there are ways to optimize this. It's calculated distance from the missile to the target. If it's less than a certain distance, it says, we call this a collision. And then it says to the game, we have a collision, you can deal with it. Now I left a part of how I would normally approach this, which is using a ray caster. In that case, you cast a little ray in front of your missile, and that just checks if it hits something. If there's nothing much in the scene, the previous version, this version might be faster. But if there's a lot going on in the scene, a raycaster might be better. The downside is you have to do a lot of extra stuff to update the raycaster because it is optimized. So if something changes in the scene, it not always automatically updates this. So I want to mention this, but it will be more. It's better, but it's way more complex as well. That's the missile components. Missing anything? Yes. Adding it. And since we're there, before we go the next step, I'm just going to add the keyboard component as well, just to save a little bit of time. This is handling a key down and a key up on the spacebar. There is this reload in here. If you press your spacebar and you keep your spacebar pressed, it starts to repeat. And yeah, that's not fun if you have a space shooter and you can just press your keyboard, so your spacebar, keep it pressed and move around. That's no fun. So I added something. You have to release it first and press it again to emit that button down event again. To add this to main. This is main. Keyboard. Let me quickly check if it's on here. Since I copied it, it's already on here. So now we should be able to spawn bullets also from the keyboard. We don't. What did I miss? Oh, we have an error here. Oh, yeah. What I did forget was adding the root object. I'm trying to add it to the missile group. I think it was the gun missile group. Yes, so now we have bullets flying around. If we quickly check VR. Should have refreshed already. Yes, see, and now we have the game. The collision is already working. That's why it was in there already. So if we hit a plane, it's just destroyed.
Now we need an explosion.
That's the next step, which I'm not going to do, and not even included in the workshop, because now we have to spawn a particle system. If you want to do it nice, you will need to have something that's animating. So you will go in and you need to create a custom shader for your particle system. And I think since I wrote this down already, I will do another take on this. Maybe I'm continuous from there on my YouTube channel. To really show how you can build upon this if people are interested in that. Now I'm going to, since we have only a few minutes left, can I switch branches here? Yes. I'm going to undo all my changes. How do we do that? Discard. Where is it? This is scary. Yes. If this goes wrong, I don't have anything left. Well, I know it's there. Let's see if we can do this. Unplanned. Git check out. What's it called? Main? I think I call it main.
Yes, main.
There we go. Thanks. So now we have this. I think this is already rebuilding. Yes. Okay. So this is the final product. So I can quickly go over what changed, what I added in this step. I updated the enemy component. This has fired a bomb group. It's where it's adding bombs. We've seen that before, and it just takes takes a random value, and after that value, is going to spawn a missile or bomb. That's already in here. Also added, if we pass the shoot time and we haven't fired yet, we fire. If we loop, we reset it. So if that is set to 2 seconds every time after 2 seconds after it loops, it fires. The reason I did a random value is that I want to have all kinds of, it needs to come from all kinds of different directions. It spawns a missile. We've seen it before as well. We create a new component. The same thing as with the shooting, we add a mix-in bomb and a missile, and we set it to target the player, and we pick the target of just the calculation that it's flying to 0, 0 basically. That's where you are standing, and if it's hitting you, now if I would have taken the raycasting route, I needed to have an object to raycast to. In this case, I didn't have to add anything, because if it's a few meters from my position, it's just you're dead. I'm going to go in the state in a second. There is a second thing here. If we collide, if there's a collision with a bomb, that only happens if it collides. If it's colliding with me, then it's game over. In that case, I set the game state to game over. I stop the enemy from spawning, and I just go in and remove all the enemies and bombs that are still flying around. So we just go, we're done. I added 2 more things. One of this image, and one of them is this image. If you're on the title screen, you cannot shoot. I just want to show this image in front of you. And if you're game over, it's the same thing, but then there's the game over image in front of you. Quickly look at the scene. We kind of seen this already before. It's just an entity with, in this case, a plane. That's all it is. It's a plane with that texture on it for title and game over. And then if you look at the game state, if the game state is title, I set title visible and game over to false. If you're playing, both are set to false. And if it's game over, the game over screen is false. And when we trigger the fire button, we check if the state. If we're playing, we're shooting a bullet. If we're not playing, we just go into game playing. We start spawning, and we update the scene to remove those things. Pretty fast, but now we have this shooter. Not sure why it's shooting a bullet, but now after 6 seconds, we should start spawn the thing. And I also added the collision with the bomb, so the bombs are a bit bigger. But if you can shoot the bombs as well, so you have to shoot the bombs, shoot the there it comes, and try to shoot the planes in here. And if we go to VR, it should still work. We have the guns, we have that image in front of us, we trigger, and now we are in the game. We can shoot bullets everywhere. Planes should start spawning over there. There we go. And now we should be able to see if we can hit them. Oh, we actually hit one. Lucky shot. And there's the bullet coming towards us. Ah, and I didn't do anything. And now I'm game over. And if we trigger, it just starts over. And that was the last 2 minutes of the game, or the last 10 minutes of the game in 2 minutes. Are there any questions? I'm just going to stop sharing my screen at this point, if I can find the button right here.
Can you quickly describe the difference between a system and a component? A component I see as a behavior, but a system I can't really play.
Yeah, there is a way of structuring it. I use it in this case for structuring things differently, because a system is accessible in a different way. You can just ask for a system instead of searching for a component. I believe there can only be one of them, but there is also a combination with the system and a component with the same name in A-frame, and then it's getting complex where you can automatically reference the component, and it's for cleaning up your code a bit.
Okay.
It's very, very similar to a component.
It's like a singleton behavior or something like that.
Yeah, I believe it's more like that.
Okay, thank you.
any more questions? Can I do this? No, I can't. I might have a link. GitHub repo where this is on. If you missed that at the start. Oh, here it is. My playbook is not in there yet. I will add that as well. So this is the repository we used. If you want to have a look at the final game, that's just the main branch. The start branch is all cleaned out. Everything is in there, except it's just put away so you can drag it slowly in. Right now, my playbook is a Word document with only a few lines. I will add that as a markdown file to the repository, so you could redo the entire thing again. And from there, I want to continue.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, if you want to reach me, I'm on the Discord as well. Link /source code. I think this is the one. Yeah. If you want to have any, if you want a place to find me or do anything, just go on that link tree. It has every place I go. If you have questions about A-Frame or anything WebXR related, you should join the WebXR Discord. There are a lot of people there. Also, the ones that actually built these things. Browser developers are in there. Link is in the Linktree link as well. There are no further questions. I just want to thank everybody for hanging out with me in the last hour and a half. And yeah, let's hope this looks great on YouTube as well, if it's edited. And with that, thanks, I guess.